This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Just for the Spell of It with Gary Moss. And Gary and I were just talking, and they are sweltering out in California today. It is 100-plus degrees, so I'm assuming you're sitting in your easy chair with the air conditioning on.
Don't have the air conditioning on yet. Trying to conserve.
Okay.
Hasn't hit 102 yet.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm just thinking of great words that we could play today, like schwitzing.
It's 93 now.
Yeah, that's worth a lot of points.
Yep.
Even though it'll take a lot of energy out of us to schwitz.
Okay. Well, hey, we can all lose some weight, if we sweat it out. So not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's sort of like, what were those huts that the Native American sweat houses?
Oh, yeah.
Sweat house.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll have, if we don't turn the air on, I predict we'll have a sweat house here without even trying by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow. Well,
yep.
Let's talk about cooler things, but let me just ask one question. Is schwitz a playable word?
Yes, it is.
Hey,
schwitz is good.
All right.
There must have been a bunch of Jews who were on the committee when Scrabble was being formed, because whether you know it or not, on the official Scrabble list, there are over 170,000 words, and close to 1,000 of those words are Yiddish words.
Interesting. Wow.
There are a lot of other ethnic sets of words in the Scrabble dictionary. The Jews don't have a corner on it. If you're into Arabic words, there are a lot of those. If you're into words from East India, there are a lot of Indian words.
Interesting.
And many others. There are many, many Spanish words. And the English language is made up of a lot of words from a lot of cultures.
Right, exactly.
When people moved to the U.S. and they brought their language with them, a lot of those words were bastardized into English words, and they became part of the language. And we don't even necessarily think of a lot of those words as being anything other than American.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. White bread, that's both white and bread, are in the Scrabble dictionary. Corned beef. Corned and beef are both in the dictionary. Tacos are in the dictionary. Even schmaltz. Do you remember schmaltz?
Oh, I do remember schmaltz. See, that was
the
fat from the chicken that they would render. Absolutely.
And they used it for cooking, and some people spread it on bread like butter.
Yep.
And, we used to eat all that stuff.
And
we probably... What?
Food tasted a lot better back in those days, too.
It really did.
But it wasn't good for us, so, yep.
Today I'd like to talk about some of the different ways we can look at words.
Okay.
We could look at words in terms of their ethnicity, and at one point somebody who happened to be Jewish was interested in finding all those Yiddish, Hebrew, Jewish type words.
Okay.
And made a list like I make all of my category lists. And I still have it on my computer somewhere.
Interesting.
So if someone out there is really curious about what can all those 700, 800, 900 Yiddish words be. I'll be happy to send it to you if you send me an email requesting it. Just ask for the Yiddish list.
Okay.
YIDDISH.
Right.
And the way that I wanted to talk about the organization of words today, we may know the term alphagram. Alphagram is a manner of arranging letters and alphabetize, alphabet. So what you would do, and this is what a lot of the experts do when they're playing. They take their letters and instead of arranging words on their rack, they arrange the letters strictly alphabetically.
Okay.
So if you have the word letters, that's the word letters,
Mm-hmm.
you would arrange it EELRSTT. That's how it would look on your rack. And the reason that they would do that is that they study words by looking at sets of letters that are alphabetized. Now, that doesn't feel particularly natural to a lot of people who are looking to make up words from the letters on your rack. But if you got used to looking at a combination EELRSTT and recognizing that to be letters, you could also recognize the anagram in that, which would be settler, SETTLER. So by setting the letters just one way, you would then learn it in combination with all of the anagrams for that particular set. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
Now, while it makes sense, it's not particularly easy at first because we're not taught to do that in school, and we probably haven't done it on our own. But I would guarantee you that if you did begin learning that way, and if you were able to train yourself in that fashion, your ranking in terms of being a better Scrabble player would go up the more successful you would be lining your things up in that way.
Interesting.
Okay.
So
that's called anagrams. Alphagrams. Alphagrams.
Okay.
Now, Scrabble players have been playing competitively now for more than 40 years. The first real hard-nosed competitions became available in the 1970s, maybe even some in the late 60s, but organized Scrabble definitely took off in the 70s. Now, as things were taking off competitively, the competitors were looking for different ways to organize letters to make their learning systems more efficient. And some of these ideas we have mentioned before, but it's always good to remind people because what we do frequently is we learn a particular system and then we do it for a while and then we put it on the side and it sometimes gets forgotten and lost. And then for some reason, maybe it's someone like me bringing it back to your attention, you'll say, oh, yeah, I remember I learned that. And then you might put it into practice again for some amount of time. Now, I constantly tell people to have a plan. And what a plan does is when we're talking about alphagrams, you make a note of that in your plan somewhere. And when you have a plan, you use spaced repetition to at least look back at your plan every so often. You can update your plan. Your plan might have all the different pieces of learning words and becoming more efficient that I teach in Scrabble 101, my online class. Now, you can't do all of those pieces every day. And so the first piece in Scrabble 101 is learning the twos. And so we all began doing that. But after a while, we realize that we've already memorized all the twos, or maybe 90 out of 100 and some odd number of twos. And so because we feel proficient, we don't do it day after day. We put it on the shelf. And then all of a sudden, we're playing a game 6 months later, and we draw a blank in our mind about a particular two, wondering, is that good, isn't it good? And maybe we don't know because we haven't used it much. Or maybe we haven't used it at all in the last 6 months. And so in our plan, we have to recycle the different pieces. And while it's not possible to, let's say, note and study all 20 pieces every day, today we study piece 1 and 2, tomorrow 3 and 4, and we set up some kind of a rotation. If there's a particular piece that is most useful to you, like stems that we talk so much about,
sure,
we put that into our plan that once a week we will review it. And then each piece is so big. Remember I told you that there are over 100 stems?
Right.
Well, the top 10 are the most productive. So today we'll study satire and satire. But if we're always studying those two highly productive stems, we never study something that's way down at the bottom of the list, like really, R-E-A-L-I-E. We rarely study that one, but it does us a benefit if it's somewhere weaved into our plan. And so making our plan and keeping our plan, circulating the information that we've acquired and items that we just haven't had time to acquire yet, it keeps things fresh. It keeps things from going stale and from us burning out. If you were to study the satire stem every day and that's all you did, after a week or two, you'll be bored with it out of your mind.
Exactly.
So today you study a stem, tomorrow you do alphagrams, the day after that you do hooks, the day after that you do something else. Sometimes, depending upon how much time you devote each day, you might be able to take on a couple pieces on the same day. But just remember to keep them circulating. And when I'm playing in games, which is another part of what we do and why we're doing all this studying, I keep notes in the margin on my scorecard when a new word comes up, when my opponent uses a hook that I didn't know before. When my opponent does a particular thing, which I think is a neat strategy by setting themselves up or by blocking me. There are all of these different factors that kind of work their way in to becoming a top-notch Scrabble player.
Well, any type of study that we can do that we can turn into having fun with is much easier, and I think you learn more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we really do. Now, going back to the time when Scrabble was evolving, and let me say this, it's a living game. It's always evolving. You might learn a system or be inclined to study words in a way that works for you that maybe no one has ever tried before. Now, one of the systems that people use that I've mentioned a few times, but it's not widely used, it's called consigrams. A consigram is a set of letters that we use to remind ourselves of words that has a particular set of consonants. We all know the difference between a consonant and a vowel. And the person that brought this to my attention, although he's not the one that originated it, linguists have used consigrams in the study of all languages around the world, probably for centuries. But this friend, Amnon Myers, happens to have been born in Israel, where they use Hebrew as their primary language. And Hebrew is made up of words using consonants, and then sometimes they put the vowels using marks for the vowels underneath the consonants. And the way this works in English, because Amnon and others use the system of consonants to learn unusual and general English words. So they'll start by taking 3 consonants, let's say, and it's usually 3. GVY. That's the 3 consonants we're going to use.
Okay.
And then they take GVY and they look for words that contain GVY in it. Not necessarily in that order, but I put GVY in alphabetical order. And it might be, if you got those on your rack at the same time, you wouldn't know what to do with them.
Right.
You wouldn't even know what to look for. So let me read you the 12 words from the Scrabble dictionary that have GVY in it.
Okay.
And now you'll probably find yourself saying, oh yeah. But if I just asked you blankly, give me a word with GVY, maybe you would come up with 1, maybe 2. Voyages, voyager, vaguely, gravelly, voyaged, vaguely, Garvey's, varying, gravity, levying, envying, vyingly. Some of those you maybe have recognized. Others you might be sitting on the edge. Is that really a word? And they are all words, and they're the only 12 words that have GVY. Now, how do you come up with a list? Well, you might go through the dictionary word by word by word. If I were doing it that way, I would start with the V's and look for a V word that also had GY in it, and I could probably find it that way. And the reason I picked V, there are probably, well, I could have used them. I was going to say there are fewer words that begin with V, but you notice V isn't always the first letter,
Sure.
so you wouldn't find all of these words like gravely. You wouldn't have found that in the V list, or levying. Another way you can find these kind of words is by using one of the anagrammers that are available both handheld and for computer program. And you simply type in the formula, which would include a GV and a Y, and you would set the preferences. Oh, I would probably look for things no longer than 8 letters, because the longer words are more difficult to impossible to play while you're playing Scrabble. And it turns out that this list of words that I gave you are all 7s and 8s. So maybe the person that created this list was only looking for bingo type words. So then you would go on to another consigram, GPV.
GPV.
P and V.
Great.
This time,
but that's too many letters. Okay, go on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I like that, because what that makes me think about, there are a lot of compound words, and I think grapevine is good. I would have to verify it with the Scrabble dictionary. But if I thought of that, it's kind of obvious. So if you have grape on the board, you can extend it to vine.
Right.
If you have vine on the board, you can put grape in front of it. But this person was looking primarily for 7s and 8s, and the 4 words they came up with is vamping, paving with an S, pavings,
Okay.
peeving, P-E-E-V-I-N-G, and proving. A lot of times when you get a combination like GPV on your rack, you just give up because you've never thought of it before. And so you'll play off a word using 1 or 2 of those letters. You might play Veep, V-E-E-P,
Right. Mm-hmm.
or Pave, P-A-V-E, without even thinking to look that there might be a bingo possibility on your rack. So consigrams is focusing on the consonants in the word and becoming familiar with those words. Now here's a combination, LTX. Does anything jump out at you?
Latex.
I can think latex. That's a 5-letter word.
Yep.
But how many 7 and 8-letter words do you think there might be with LTX?
Laxative.
Good. Okay. So at least you're turned into thinking, you're tuned into it, that there may be some. And by me asking that question to you directly, it pushed you to think of 1 or 2. There are actually 34.
Wow.
Taxable, taxably, salt box, Did you ever think of salt box?
No, never thought of that one.
Yeah, exalted. Foxtail.
Foxtail?
Oxtail.
Huh.
Yeah. Oxy salt. I just find it amazing looking at these words because there are a number of them I like and I knew, like latex is, telex is, textual, luxates, textile, sextile, exploit, triplex. We know what a biplex is.
Right.
Triplex is a 3-house unit. You know the word sixth, first, second, third, fourth,
right.
fifth, sixth.
Yep.
But how about sixth, L-Y, lead, sixthly, firstly, secondly, thirdly. So looking at lists like this jars one's thinking. Just seeing them doesn't put it in your memory completely.
Right.
It stirs your thinking. If it excites your memory, you can do something about adding it. I might sit down and type out a list like firstly, secondly, thirdly, just doing that exercise in a different form, maybe writing it down on a card and putting it with things that I review every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
It might stir my thinking so that when I have an LY, I'll think to see if LY goes with some of the other things I have on my list. All of this is about getting yourself to step outside of the box of the way you usually learn things, learn them differently. And so Consigrams was one of the tools that Scrabble people used to expand the way they thought about words. And today there still are a lot of people, like my friend Amnon, who still uses Consigrams when he's looking at sets of letters on his rec. And he's done it for so long, so often, he's very expert at doing that. Now, if I were to show this system to somebody who studies using alphagrams, they might think this is silly because it has nothing to do with the way they learn. And so we do sort of get trapped into our own way of thinking, into our own way of doing things.
What I find interesting is that as we mature and get older, we find all these ways of learning that fit our lifestyle, but yet in our schools, it's hard for teachers to adapt to everybody's learning ability. And
well, yeah, you're absolutely right, because the class size is usually a real challenge when you're getting 30 and more students in a class. To create individualized instruction is really difficult. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it just is very difficult. Which brings me back to another thought that I may have shared before, but in the late 60s, early 70s, I was in a position where I helped found a school which started out as a preschool and then expanded to the grades K through 8. In that school, because I was in charge and because I had a philosophy of how education worked. I wanted it to be individualized. I knew the value of individualized instruction. I came to learn part of it because of one of my own children, my daughter Stacy. Stacy had some learning difficulties. And when we put her in the public schools, this was before I had the grades available in my school, she stumbled around in learning things. And I remember getting the warnings from the teachers at parent-teacher conferences and on special little notes that Stacy was failing. Well, I was fortunate enough to have a few extra dollars in my pocket, and we withdrew Stacy from public school, and we sent her to a Montessori school. Now, you hear a lot of wonderful things said about Montessori schools, and I'm not saying this to knock them in any way, but they have their own philosophy of how they teach things at Montessori school. They'll use the word individualized. However, they individualize teaching, but the techniques that they use are Montessori techniques, proven techniques that work for anybody who can learn the Montessori way. And during that year that Stacy was at the Montessori school, when she was still failing to grasp different concepts, they would have her do it again and again and again, figuring that their philosophy worked for all children. And what I learned during that experience was that it did not work for Stacy. And I was pretty sure of that beforehand because I believed in individualized learning.
Right.
And one system does not fit all. Well, during that year that Stacy was fumbling around in the Montessori school, one of my favorite things to do was to get up on Sunday morning and to watch TV. And there was one program in particular, it was called Sunday Morning. And on that Sunday, just almost prophetically, there was a program about a school in Rochester, New York, called the Gow School, G-O-W.
Okay.
The Gow School was developed primarily for kids who had something called dyslexia, which they were just learning about. And it was a residential school, and they took some of the kids with the worst cases of dyslexia from all over the state of New York, and they sent them to this school. And what I sat watching on that Sunday morning was how they taught these kids. And more importantly, I watched these kids, and in them, I saw my daughter Stacy. Some of the same challenges that she had, these kids had. Well, the program ended at about 11 a.m. And by 10 after 11, I was on the telephone, and I called the Gow School. And I said, I just watched this program. I'm an educator. Can I please come and visit? And they said, when would you like to come? And I said, tomorrow. And this was a Sunday in the middle of the winter. There was snow and ice on the road. I knew that in good weather, Rochester was about 6 hours away if I cut through Canada from Detroit. And they said, sure, come tomorrow. By noon, I was packed in my car and on the road. Monday morning, when the doors opened, I was standing on the stoop at the Gauss School, and I spent one of the most fascinating days of my life. I talked with teachers, I talked with administrators, I talked with some of the kids, I watched them do whatever they did. I thought to myself as I was watching them do the exercises, I can do that. I can do that. I thanked them profusely at the end of the day. I came back to Michigan. On Tuesday, I put an ad in the local paper. The ad said, if school is failing your child, come to my open meeting where I might be able to help you. This was at the end of February. My meeting was the second week of March. 30 families came. 29 families left me checks.
Wow.
Because I promised that the following September I would open grades K through 8 and we would have individualized programs for their kids. One girl was blind. One boy was deaf. 4 kids were labeled emotionally disabled. Stacy and one other child had dyslexia. How can you teach such a mixed up group, you ask me?
Yeah,
you
I
teach
wonder.
them
Yeah.
You teach them individually. You find out what they need. You find teachers who can teach those things. You give them a small enough group of children to work with that they can individualize their approach. The program was successful from day one. I was able to find people with PhDs who came to work for me for minimum wage.
Wow.
I didn't charge these families a king's ransom. I charged them what was reasonable for a private school experience. Of all of these kids, I tracked them over the years. They all went on to higher learning. Stacy graduated with a teaching degree in art. She didn't really master her dyslexia until years later, but those tools were still developing until she was well into college.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably still developing today. When someone says to me, oh, those people with dyslexia have such a challenge, they can't really be expected to do very much. Stacy is an amazing artist. And I may have mentioned this person before. He's a friend. His name is Rod Nivison. Rod Nivison is one of the top Scrabble players in the country, and he is dyslexic. He figured out ways to get around his dyslexia, and with letters, with Scrabble, yep, he was able to do it. People can do anything.
Absolutely.
When they have the right tools, when they have the right motivation, when somebody is there showing them how they can and not sending home notes saying that this person shouldn't attempt that because they have too big of a challenge.
Absolutely. And we hear, I remember a lot of that going on when we were going to school, but I hear a lot of it today, where sometimes parents are told, your child is not college bound, so maybe they should be going to a trade school. And if that is not in the interest of the child, sending them to a trade school can make them feel even less able to do something. On the other hand, there are kids who learn better by using a trade. And that was something that I always used to say when I was going to school. You want me to learn math, but why can't I learn math in the way that I'm going to use it? Having me do X's and Y's and find, the sum of Z, it was like, this makes no sense to me. And nobody could actually sit down and explain to me why we were, doing formulas like that.
Mm-hmm.
But once I got into college, I started to understand more because I applied it towards my major, what I was interested in.
What I hope people take away from today's show is that if you're plugged into something and there are systems that make it easier for you, like alphagrams or consagrams or stems or whatever, if you're into Scrabble and learning words, these all will make a lot of sense to you. And if you have any other areas where you've stumbled, but you really have a passion to do something, there are systems out there that are available to find. It's easier these days because of the internet. Back in the 70s, when I was expanding my school, I just happened to stumble across a TV program.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but in today's world, it should be a lot easier, and I definitely challenge you to do whatever it takes to help yourself or to help other dear ones around you.
What a great message. Well, we want to encourage everybody to go out to Gary's website as well, just for the spell of it, .com, and it's JUST, the number 4, the spell of it. And Gary writes a daily blog, and we want to congratulate you because you have over 365 days of blogs out there.
Well, I congratulate you too, because we now have an entire year of podcasts.
Right, we certainly do. And for those of you listening, some of the things that Gary was talking about, if you're looking for additional help or resources, check out some of our other programs here at New Cleveland Radio, because all of our programming is designed to help you through the challenges of daily life. And Scrabble is a challenge for many of us, whether we're playing the game or trying to write a letter or looking for the right word when we're having a conversation. So continue listening, continue sharing, and Gary will be back again next week.
Okay, have a great week.
You
Stay
too.
safe.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.